Welcome to The Secret Witch Show, the podcast providing a safe and alchemical altar space of conversations which help powerful women escape a half-hearted, spiritless society and rediscover the freedom of living a wildly magical life. Every other week, we explore how to cast aside the wounds of shame, guilt, and fear connected with fully being yourself, so you can grant yourself permission to stop hiding, ground soulfully back into your body, illuminate your whole soul desires, tend your soul, rediscover and reclaim your powerful gifts, express your magic, and manifest your wildest alchemy. There's no better place to become who your heart longs to be. This is where we will guide you into liberation. I'm your host, Nicole Barton, and I'm so excited to dive in. Welcome, beautiful souls. How are we? I have been so excited to share something that we've been creating this year in our Secret Witch Society sisterhood, which is called The Invitation. I've been called for some time to really nurture our community because sisterhood is really one of the most important 8 elements of our archetypal apothecary path. And so in January, we introduced a beautiful free weekly journey in our sisterhood that helps you to get more deeply in tune with your soul, and it's absolutely free. So each week, and it's been very much designed around the moon's natural rhythms, we'll pop an inquiry, a ritual, a practice, or a reflection, which helps you to really explore a particular monthly theme that suits both sensitive souls and aspiring healers. So it's designed to help you deepen in your path of becoming a healer in the 3 steps of healing yourself, discovering your soul plan and gifts, and learning to express those gifts into the world. If that is what you're here for and you're loving this podcast, then head over and join us by searching Secret Witch Society on Facebook and dive in. I've had lots of feedback that people are really loving the invitations so far. Many are sharing, which is medicine in and of itself. I always say we're archetypal remedies for each other. And my heart be full if you want to join us. I do know as well that a lot of shame and fear can come up around sharing yourself. So please do engage with whatever soft edge you need to meet. But firstly, let's dive into our episode this week, which is quite topical, given it's exploring shame, guilt, and blame. On the Secret Witch Show today, our guest is Shanti Zimmerman. Shanti described herself as a human just like you. She's learned how to navigate being human with deep integrity, clarity, and a focus on growth and real life. She has complex and compound trauma from her childhood that, for a portion of her life, made it hard to be alive. The work that she facilitates is based on how she found her way to a life worth living. She had a whole lot to unlearn and a ton of adult skill sets she had to develop and practice, and she shares everything she knows from her lived experience. She believes that liberation is our natural default setting as human beings, and she contributes to it in every moment of her life. In this particular episode, we explore the notion of healing and the language around it, and especially how we don't need to outsource our power to quick fixes. But if we learn to deconstruct blame, shame, and guilt, we can learn to embody our adulthood, make new choices, and embody deeper self-trust. Shanti describes blame, shame, and guilt as synthetic constructs, behaviour controllers that are not our innate natural emotions, and narratives that invoke emotional response or a habit that creates somatic response in our bodies. And she explores how it's possible we can alchemise shame and radically refuse to engage with our self-oppression. Let's dive in. Welcome, Shanti. I am so delighted to have you with us here today. We connected fairly recently over a beautiful post that you shared that just spoke to my heart and was really encouraging what I'd call self-illumination around shame, blame, and guilt. That was really very aligned with my own worldview around healing, and I thought, our listeners will love this. So here we are, and I can't wait to dive in with you. Thank you for being here and welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
No, it's my pleasure. I'm going to start where I always start, because I think stories are medicine for other people. And so my invitation at first is for you to just start with sharing your own journey with deconstructing blame, shame, and guilt, and how that's helped you arrive at a deeper self-trust.
Okay, how long do we have? No, I'll try this. So the story, I'll tell it like this. So I grew up, from my childhood, I have both compound and complex trauma. And I spent a good portion of my childhood, my young adulthood, not trusting myself, not even knowing it was an option to think outside that which I had been taught to think. And I like to tell it in pieces. As a child, I looked around and I thought, where are all the adults? Like the real adults, because whatever's going on around here, this is not safe. This is not good. This is not holy, as in wholeness. As I came into my teenagerhood and young woman, I looked around and I was like, where are all the women in like fundamental roles in my life? And when I turned 40, it was, where are all the elders? And so this is just how my mind works, how my quest for knowing who I am unfolded, right? And in owning who I am now as a woman, as an adult, and as a working towards my eldership, to be an ancestor worthy of descending from.
That's gorgeous.
That's what's led me the whole way, right? This is my thread, why I do what I do, how I do what I do. I had no one to help me. I was really groping in the dark, looking for how do I navigate the internal landscape of utter chaos and destruction that was still sometimes is my internal experience of myself and the world. And I started to piece together ways to navigate that, to be so mostly to not pay it forward. There's a big thing that happened that dropped in me. It was like, this, whatever this is, ends with me. I didn't know what that meant. I had no idea what I didn't have like the outcome is this. I didn't have some like big vision. It was just this crap that is running in my family that I see around me, that it stops with me. I will not contribute to this. And I didn't know what the work of that meant, but I didn't, and I just committed, became devoted to like, it ends with me. I don't know how, I don't know the way. I'm just going to start taking the steps. And I started teaching. Emotional alchemy is what I called it a while ago. Just teaching what I was discovering for myself brought me closer to feeling more whole, feeling more like myself. I got in a lot of trouble. I hired a lot of really bad actors in my life. I had some crappy, abusive relationships as a young adult, and then abusive relationships in like business after I was married and had a healthy thing there. And because of not having the skill sets, not understanding how to navigate it outside of a traumatic response, or outside of, I deserve to be treated like crap, which is a lie, but it felt really real for a long time. And I have been teaching the specific skill set of deconstructing blame, shame, and guilt for a really, really long time, probably for me, 20 years. And it extends, right? Blame, shame, and guilt are like the babies. They're the beginning. But everything that grows into dehumanizing us, so there's blame, shame, guilt, doubt, unnecessary fear, self-sabotage, jealousy, animosity, suspicion. All of these things are of the same root. And they're not innate nor natural to us as human beings. They're things that we've been taught. And this has always been a piece. And then in 2018, my father died, which cracked open a lot of things, being able to see a lot of patterns all at once. And care dropped in as a skill set, not as just something that you're supposed to do. And I'm not talking about the kind of care where other people can see it. Like if I bring you a bowl of soup or I soften my child's back, that's all something somebody can see. This is a care that is born of you, every single human being, and is with you every single moment of your life, and is for no one else. A care from the inside that is just there for you. And when that practice and that skill set really clicked in and I started to teach it, blame, shame, and guilt, the construction of it became much more straightforward. Because without the care, I could do the work of deconstructing, but it would like loop back in. Right? So it was like you could deflect with a shield, but there was no shield. So you deflect and it could loop back. It was deflected. But when you really care about being free from shame, blame, and guilt and the counterparts that come later, it shields you from the loop. And I start, I never had an idea this would work for other people. Never. I was never like, I've got to go tell the world this and save it. Never. It was like, well, it works for me, so I'm going to share and see what happens. And it just happens to work because they're skill sets. I teach them as a skill set, like riding a bike.
I love everything that you've just shared there. What's jumping out at me at the moment, actually, because I know a lot of women kind of like go hunting for even their gifts. This isn't quite where I was expecting this to go necessarily, but like there's just this beautiful sense of like your story being that reclamation and that just then rippling out to other people.
Right.
And that's very much how I see, becoming our gift works. It's like we don't go hunting and be like, okay, what's my gift? Well, I mean, there's an element of usefulness in that at times, but it's like this very organic, natural process of you just like.
Well, I would never teach and never facilitate something I am not living and embodying time on task doing.
Absolutely.
Ever.
Yeah.
And so, and the times that I tried, it was just, there's ricochet and whip and like, it comes back and it's like, well, that's not integral. And so I don't even speak about things. I'll just give you an example. I just finished a 6-year-long training with a Maori elder in New Zealand. For 5 years, I did that work and nobody heard me talk about it.
Yeah.
And this last year, now that I have permission and I've been working on other people, but I don't talk about it. But now, and my teacher was like 3 years ago, go. But now I'm standing in what I feel is my integrity, where I can say, okay, I have enough practice and time on task to share this and feel absolutely 100% in my own body, with my feet on the ground, with my own experience of myself in that role. And that is what keeps me grounded. So I don't go out there. I don't feel insecure or unsure when I go to do this now at all, because I have the time on task. And so sometimes it's important for us to go, and also times there's things you're doing in life that you're helping and other people and you don't give it value. You would think this isn't going to be valuable to anybody else, or it's right in front, and then you try to go learn something else or start somebody else's program or whatever, instead of like, wait a second, let me get more honest with myself about this very simple thing that I do, that I'm able to do, and how valuable that might be to others.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. And largely because of shame. So this is, I guess, the importance of this work of deconstructing blame, shame, and guilt, because it even plays into how we express in the world as healers. But I think there's this whole, we can talk about the word healing and, and all of that. But yeah, there's this whole kind of journey of, healing ourselves first. And we'll dive into that. Maybe we'll dive into that now. I just wanted to see if there was anything else from what you shared at the beginning, because I just absolutely loved your story.
So part of what I do is deconstruct language. There's the idea that there are healers and there are non-healers is a bunch of crap. And I think that just that step, if somebody takes just this, what I just said from this conversation that you and I are having, it can start to unravel some of those things about, like, I never wanted to call myself a healer ever. I'm like, well, nah, because it has, it's been misused. And because we're living in the centuries long, this pool of shame and specialness and superiority and inferiority, all of these things built upon blame, shame, and guilt, right? They wouldn't be able to hold water if they weren't. So the idea that being a healer makes you special or makes you target, or all those things are just, they're lies, they're untrue. There's not a person on the planet who's not a healer, because each of us is the healer each of us needs.
Yes, I love that. And this is what I loved about reading your post, because I know when we had a brief discussion, we talked about the languaging of healing. And I think that's really helpful to break down, because so many women who are listening to this, especially as well, would have tried all the things, all the quick fix solutions, you know, all the sticky plasters, the numbing, and
Which are made attractive through blame, shame, and guilt, by the way.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Yes. And so, you know, I still use the languaging of healing, like becoming a healer,
Yeah.
learning to self-heal. And I talk about it, you know, not as the quick fixes, but as the real art of healing, which I think you and I are both speaking to using slightly different language. And I think it's just a really helpful conversation to
Let's
have.
see how this changes it. So if you take out the
Mm,
word healer, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it,
mm,
and you look at people coming into the work that you do being growth oriented. This is
yeah.
natural for human beings. I want to grow. I want to learn. I want to help.
Yeah.
And then you slack healer on top of that.
Mm,
In today's world, it makes static. Right? Instead of like, oh, I know Fred down the street and he does this kind of thing. And if you have this kind of problem, I know Jane down that street and she does this kind of thing. That's our natural orientation to be quote unquote healers, to help each other with the knowledge that we know.
Yes. And that's the beauty.
Yeah,
That's the
and know the other people who have other knowledge and do other things.
But
Because
what
there's lots of shit I'm
particularly,
not good at. And I will
yeah.
never, ever try to help somebody with.
But I
Like,
think what's really helpful about what you said was that we're our own self-healers. I think that's the thing that often women who are listening to this maybe miss or can't quite find a way into embracing that aspect of themselves. And I think what you're speaking to is almost the art of self-healing, although you don't call it that.
well, and I do want again, because this deconstruction, there is absolutely the truth to we heal ourselves. And then there is the truth that we also need others in our healing, not to tell us what to do, not to heal us, but to participate in the healing of ourselves.
Yes. Yeah.
Nobody's trying to fix me. I'm not trying to be healed by somebody else. If somebody else touches me, I am consenting to a healing moment in my body with that person.
Yes. I love that. I kind of the way I'd see it is it's almost like other people are like helping us activate or illuminate things that we may not have seen. It's almost like people are mirrors.
I think very, very like logically, we need other bodies, period. It doesn't like, not that it doesn't matter what the bodies are doing, but we need other bodies and other all kinds of different healing arts, if you will,
Yes.
on the road and on the journey. And of course, it's super important to pick those people with a massive level of discernment, which is another skill set to talk about.
Yes. Yes. We'll get to
But
it.
discernment is impossible. Shame and guilt are running.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. I can see, because we're here to talk about trust as well, self-trust, and I can see how that ties into that. So let me just feel where to go next, because one of the things I also loved around what you're saying was where are the adults? And that feels very kind of present for me as well, and what I've been sharing recently, because I'm about to lead a journey called Aurum, which is about it's with an archetypal remedy called Aurum, which is gold. Again, those remedies being kind of mirrors for us.
Yeah.
And part of her picture for self-illumination is this piece around like the almost like the missed initiation we had into our adulthood, because it just wasn't there. And I think part of what we're talking about here is that we learned as little girls, both we were shamed ourselves and also we learned how to then shame ourselves. And we were talking a little bit to that just before we pressed record. So I'm wondering if we start there actually. Let me just feel into that, because yeah, I think it could be helpful actually to just explore either that or the piece around what do we actually mean by deconstructing blame, shame, and guilt as well.
So I'll start by saying adulthood is impossible if you are still running the programming of blame, shame, and guilt.
Yes, I love that.
So blame, shame, and guilt, doubt, unnecessary fear, there's a lot of layers, but I start with blame, shame, and guilt because it's the basic foundation of where these things arise from. So blame, shame, and guilt are taught into us. We are not born with them. A 2.5-year-old, a 3-year-old who's had a wholesome, pretty much life together without trauma is not going to automatically feel shame. Shame is something that is conditioned, it's a construct, it's synthetic. It's not natural to feel shame, it's not natural to feel guilt, it's not natural to automatically blame somebody for the things that are happening. Right? That's not our natural, innate way of healthily relating. It's something that is taught into us. And I can't emphasize that enough. And I also don't want anybody to believe me. I'm offering a different option. So this isn't like you have to take my word for it. Don't like just if this gives you a seed of being able to think about it differently, then I'm happy. I've done my work. So with that, knowing that this does not mean that today in your 35 or 45 or 50 or 80-year-old body, you don't have the experience of shame in your body, or have the experience of guilt in your body, or have the experience of blame or blaming yourself. I'm not saying it's fake. I'm not saying your experiences. I'm saying that those experiences are constructs that were taught to you that are not innate and you do not have to participate in. There's no reason to be loyal to them. The way that you know that pure, innate, emotional response to life, feelings, however you want to call them, they will, once felt, even if it's the deepest grief, will leave you feeling more whole and more like yourself every single time.
I absolutely love that. And I'd just like to pause there because I think I often talk about this almost like as knowing what's true, what's a true feeling or a natural feeling, rather than, I love the word synthetic that you use, that like really clearly defines it. And I'm just wondering if you can give some examples of those two different types of things. I mean, we're talking about shame being synthetic, but is there anything you can give an example?
So the first one I just gave you,
Yes.
Natural innate is if you feel it and you've moved through, you will feel more whole, more real to yourself, more in your body. It won't be, and you won't feel like you need to hide from it. And you won't feel like you need to defend yourself for it or from it. Right? Shame, and it's going to land you in a better place eventually. Natural innate emotions, right? So shame, blame, and guilt and their counterparts are always, without fail, going to make you feel like shit. Ad nauseum, without a break. There will be no break from it. Because if you hook into it and you keep going with it, it will get worse and worse and worse. And it's never like, it does not lead you to a better place, mentally, physically, emotionally, or spiritually, ever. That's how you know it's synthetic. And I have had people argue with me, and that's fine. I don't care. But I will stand on this line for the rest of my life. That this is not necessary. These things, they're not helping your life move forward. They don't help you be a better person. And they actually don't help you actually and sustainably change behaviors. They block you from changing behaviors. Because if you feel ashamed of a behavior, the last thing you're going to do is go into it and figure out what it's doing, how it's working, and decide to change it.
I was just thinking about that because a lot of the work that I do with remedies is very much around what you could call shadow work, although for me it's about illuminating wounds and yeah, the kind of inner little girl and how she feels about things. But it very much feels to me that shame is kind of almost like the blocker to being able to go into those things, which I guess is what you mean by the other things build on top, right?
The other way I say that is it keeps you in an adolescent mind frame and not being able to break out of that, not being able to grow out of the adolescent way, like orientation to life.
Yes, I love that.
It prevents adulthood.
Yeah, gorgeous. And it's something that's so powerful, yet we just don't learn it in
and nobody talks about it. Nobody tells you this is even a possibility. There's even massive levels of science done on shame and guilt and blame that come up with like another side. And I'm like, I mean, that's great. And if it works for you, cool. But I'm telling you can live without it at all. Not even a little bit.
Gorgeous. Well, that's very radical. So let's dive into that then. How do we begin to do that?
A lot of it is just having the knowledge that we've already talked about, just understanding it's a possibility. And then it's about awareness, because we've all been taught that in a very real sense, we're not allowed to be aware in every moment of our lives. And shame and guilt and blame it turns into and sophisticates into dissociative behaviors and abusive behaviors where we quote unquote check out. And we were born fully capable of being aware in every moment, no matter how intense the moment is, no matter what life is doing, to have a full awareness inside our own selves about ourselves, the other people, and the world around us. And that awareness is what we actually are cultivating in how I teach, right? The more you create that awareness, the more you start to look at, you feel shame and you drop your whole life and you go into it. And you're like, what are you? Who are you? What are you doing here? And you start to actually like be curious about the experience. And because what shame, blame, and guilt do is it makes you, you try to get away from it. Right? That's another way you know it's not an innate experience. And if they're underneath or behind or around, however we're going to talk about it, shame can be a lot of grief or a lot of anger, all these natural human emotional experience that are necessary for us to have. And we, because the shame is on top, we're afraid to feel it. But we're not afraid of our anger. We're not afraid of our sadness or our grief, but shame will tell us that we are. And so then it's about, I feel what this feels like. I can taste it. So now I know its signature. Also, how you find out it's synthetic or whatever word's going to work for you is by taking your awareness and putting it right there. What does this feel like in my body? What's the origin? What does it taste like when it shows up? That's the first step. And that could take 2 years by itself. I always say I'm not a quick fix. We've been indoctrinated in this for centuries and centuries upon time, but I can tell you with 5 years of time on task with the 20 or so skill sets, it starts to be more default. Like you don't have to think about it as much. It's like riding a bike. At first, it can be only the skill sets I teach are not a bike. You've never seen the construct before. I'm like, here's the wheel, here's how this thing goes. This is how the thing works. And you have to learn how it works. But once you learn how it works, you just can do it. So that's the first step. When you know what it tastes like, when you know what it feels like when it like crawls up your back and up, for me, it's like up my back, up my neck, up the back of my ears, and my whole face lights on fire. Then when it shows up, you can start to say, no, thank you. This is not real. This is not something that contributes to my life. This is not something that's helpful nor healing. This is something that is only harmful. And I can start to say no. Right? And in a myriad of different ways. And eventually gets to the point where you feel it and you're like, you don't go in, oh, nope. I go directly to whatever it is that it thinks it's trying to protect. Like, I don't have time for you. I don't need a middleman. Thank you very much. I'm going to go directly to my experience. And then over time, it just becomes second nature. So when I started teaching this, I didn't know you could live without it. I just knew it's the other place it lives is the asshole in your head that most people I know have, right? And I wound up giving it, for me personally, the name Golem. Other people have other names. But it's the one, it's a part of us that we identify with unnecessarily, but we don't know that. Nobody's doing this on purpose. That talks shit to you all day long about you to your face. Why the fuck are you doing that? Who the fuck do you think you are? Oh my God, I can't believe you did that. You're such a piece of shit. I don't know what your guys' sounds like, but that was a little snippet of mine. And so, and the first thing was, it felt like it was my skin. It felt like it was me. I identified, this is me. And I had to pull that out a little bit. I started to like push it out a little bit in my awareness so that it wasn't right up in my face. And then I could begin to realize, who I am, don't talk to anybody like that. My innate self wouldn't even think, like, that's not even, that's a really odd thing to be doing to anyone. And begin to be able to move it out. And so then by the time I could move it out, I started, teaching people, put it in the back seat. And if you can, move it to the trunk, but do not let it drive your bus. Don't let it drive it. So you're going to move it. You're going to move it. You're going to move it. I did this for a long time, a lot of time on task, moving it to the back seat. And every once in a while it would jump out and scream in my face. You know, and I have to go through the skill sets and kind of like feel like you're back here, you don't get to drive the bus. And then over time, the awareness inside of me opened up. It's like, shit, if I keep any kind of relationship to this golem, I am actively participating in an abusive relationship with myself.
Mm. Mm.
I'm tolerating inside of me, in the privacy of my own being, where nobody else can see it, an abusive relationship.
Mm.
And those are like those moments for me where it's like, it ends with me. And I don't know what that means. But it's
Mm.
like, I cannot even entertain the idea about blame, shame, and guilt being an option in my body.
Mm.
Because then I am at this point in my awareness on purpose having an abusive relationship inside of me. But this
Mm.
can't be. And that awareness opened up the thing where Golem kind of crawled up onto like a funeral pyre of his own. And I'm like, this is weird. And there was like this throb sheet, a farewell kind of thing. So I'm not just surfing for the a farewell. And I was like, all right. Now I had no expectations. I don't know what's happening. I have a lot of I personify my entire internal landscape. I'm like, okay, cool, great, cool, good, go die, whatever. It's fine.
Bless you. One of the things that I love about what you're sharing there is like the sense of humor, because I think that again almost like diffuses the level of shame and blame and guilt that we have. The way I would describe it is almost like you're like, that would be my inner little girl is how I would describe it. And it's helpful to remember as well that she's doing it innocently. She's just giving what she's been taught.
Yeah, I'd like, so
Yeah.
what it helps is to know that I didn't do this to myself,
Mm.
right? This was done to me. But with awareness, as soon as I become aware, I can no longer say that.
Yes. Ooh, I love that.
Right? I can no longer make that claim because now I know I'm doing it to myself. Right?
I
Now,
love
and who
that so
put it in
much.
there is responsible for putting it in there, but they can't get it out of me because they would probably like to keep it in there. So it has to be me. And the other thing about I don't talk, I did a lot of reparenting and inner child work for a long time. I no longer do that work and I no longer use that language. And I just want to offer that. My inner child, like, and there's lots of different ages, I have complex and compound trauma, has no business in my life interacting with other adults.
Mm.
No, that's inappropriate.
Mm.
So my job as an adult is to make sure she goes off and plays with her Barbie and gets to do all the things she didn't actually get to do in her childhood. And when
Mm.
she shows up, I'm like, this is not for you.
Mm.
I've got us.
Mm.
It's me now.
Yeah,
I've got your
I
back.
love that.
I've got you always. Now you go play. Because
I
that's
love
what
that. There's a real important distinction there, actually, because so many people do engage with inner child work in that way, whereas the way I engage with it is very similar to what you're saying there. It's almost like there's this sense of like there's an inner little girl. There's also I've said about Aurum, so like Aurum is the powerful aspect, like this adult, this inner the adult womanhood who knows how to hold this inner little girl, and I think that's what you're speaking to there, and I
keep
love.
her safe, protect her, and not expose her to things she should never be exposed to.
Mm.
I get to be what she needed her whole life.
Mm. Yeah.
And so there was no longer an internal for me separation between little girl and me. So now
Mm.
when I have a trigger in my
Mm.
body with trauma, I can feel, I know the age of it
Mm.
as a memory, but not as there's actual living.
Mm.
As an adult, I am now a safe enough space to feel the somatic memory
Mm.
without being destabilized, without, sacrificing myself in any way. And so it's immediate. I'm like, okay, this is a small part and there's space for that. And it happens quite rapidly.
I
And
love
sometimes
that.
still over days. But sometimes it still does take about 3 days to work through something like that for me.
I love that. One of the things that I'd love to explore as well, I think we briefly talked about, was I know you've described these shame, blame, and guilt as narratives or constructs made up by humans, not innate emotional experiences. And I just wanted to speak to the somatic kind of link into that? Because from my worldview, you know, as we have these narratives, they will kind of then trickle into ourselves, and we will feel the impact
When
of
you
that.
feel shame today, it's a real feeling for you. I'm not saying that.
Yes,
No.
so that's what and I know you're not. It's just, I
Yeah.
think it's helpful to
And so
kind of get
when you
clear.
start to explore it, actually, the feeling of shame is your door in. So it's not to go,
Yes.
oh, I'm not going to do that, and start swiping left. That would be premature,
Yeah.
right? The first thing is to go, oh, this is what shame feels like, and to fully embody what that feels like so that you find the door.
Yes.
Telling yourself I shouldn't feel shame is not going to get you anywhere.
Yes, I
I
love
can tell
that.
you that from 20 years of time on task. I do not suggest you try that. I don't suggest you try that, because you're just lying to yourself. Your body's like, I've been feeling this for, 20, 40, 30 years. You can't tell me that this isn't real. The experience that you're experiencing is real to you. And I'm not at all trying to take that away, but it's about exploring it so that you can move it, so that it's no longer holding you, because these blame, shame, and guilt, and their babies or children, as they, or we sophisticate it as we get older. Their only purpose is destruction. And their main development, they were designed to be coercive, to be abusive, and for mass manipulative control of other people's behavior. So as long as they're running in you, it's easy for someone else to hook in and manipulate you. It's easy for someone to hook in and tell you, oh, do you want this? Oh, you have wrinkles on your forehead. Do you, that's kind of ugly. Do you want a cream for this? And I'm just like, why would I want that? That's where I'm sitting, because I'm like, that nobody can shame me, but not even myself. That's my tag, right? Because it's not gonna go in. I'm like, if you try to shame me, that's kind of weird, because it's not gonna hit here. It's fun as hell being on this side of it and watching people watching people like use these scripts because they have been so effective, and then they don't have a script anymore because it's not happening. There's no hook. And they don't know what to do. And that's the other thing I love to tell people. Golem, that voice in your head that is built of blame, shame, and guilt, that's its origins, doesn't have a lot of comebacks. So I can have a deeply meaningful conversation with my grief, and it can go on for a long time, and there's such meaning and depth and nourishment. If you talk to Golem, it's going to end real fast. Unless you're like in commiseration with him, like, I am such a piece of shit. He's like, yeah, and that's about his only function. But if you turn to him and be like, if the voice goes to you, who the fuck do you think you are? And you're like, well, how much time do you have? I'd like to tell you who I am and who I think I am. I have a whole story for you. Or if another one that worked for me is, I remember recognizing it and being like, you're hurting me. And it went silent. It has no rebuttal. Its only job is to tell you what a crappy, crappy, crappy person you are, and how you make really bad choices, and you're always doing these things. And it's because the synthetic nature of shame, when it was put into you, hurt so bad that we developed a second cognitive entity inside of entity is a bad word in these places, right? But it was like we split our thinking. So we now have two ways of thinking. There's our innate thinking, and there's what I call the Western colonial structured way of thinking, which is blame, shame, and guilt, and everything that found around it. So you create this, and it usually starts around 7, if you're being taught that. And that second, it's a big bloom at 7 years old of cognitive function in the brain. And so if they're getting it by this age, it just blooms into like this voice that tells you what you're not doing right. If they don't, there's a voice that comes online that's just really normal and innate, like you and I could talk when that's not present. But when it is present and it cognates, but it's not real cognition. It's not a real thinker. It's not the part of us that like can solve a math problem. It's not the part of our nervous system that can feel the environment around us. It's nothing but what we considered at the time that it developed, because we didn't understand. So we don't understand. Shame comes as an you're not this. So the person who's supposed to give us the affection and care and understanding pushes us out in some way, physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. And as a child, you don't know what to do with this. So you, without explanation and without being carried through, you internalize it into this voice. So let me see if I can shame myself so quicker than the person who is shaming, because I don't want to lose that connection, which is vital to my survival.
Yeah.
So I will start to twist myself and manipulate my behavior to try to not get caught and not be hurt and not be ostracized.
To keep ourselves safe.
Yes. So the function is an awesome one, but it's not the kind of safety that we need to hold on to. It's the thing that eventually becomes very unsafe.
Yes. Yeah. No, that makes so much sense. I don't know whether this is a really strange question actually, but I was just interested. This may or may not be something you can answer, but I was just wondering if there are any particular ways that you see shame and blame express in the body. I look for patterns in terms of that, because I notice
You're
with
absolutely
working with
right that they
remedies.
are patterns. And they are, so I said, a blame, shame, and guilt script has about 5 options. Once those 5 options run out, there's nothing. It's not creative. It's not life making. It's not going to go very far. It's going to end. But because it is so effective, if you have it deep, if you're running that pattern, it's instantaneous. Like it will go right past your radar, and you'll feel some kind of way, but you won't know why. Right? So my first like foray into this was I was online. This was years ago. I've been online for a really long time. And I had started posting a lot of selfies when it was the very beginning of selfies. Like today, it's like but it was the very beginning of selfies where anybody was making and posting any kind of thing like this. And a younger woman wrote to me and she said, "You're so fucking vain," like in my DMs. And I was like, and I remember where I was. And I was like, and my body responded, right, with this heat rising up over my breasts, up my neck, over my ears. And I was like, what in the hell? First, I didn't really understand what vain meant. But I knew that she wasn't being nice.
Yeah.
Right? That it was implying something. And then later on, she went on and on about the pictures I post, right? And I was like, and that's when I was like, what are you? Who are you? What are you doing here? And I recognized it as shame. She was trying to control me. She was trying to tell me she didn't, for whatever reason, her reasons are, instead of dealing as an adult with her feelings, she wanted me to stop posting pictures of myself for however the way it was making her feel, which has nothing at all to do with me.
And was probably linked to her own shame.
Yeah, yes, but, right. And so, and that was when I realized this is what this is. And I could never not feel it again, never not know what it was again. And so, and the world is full, our language, all of our colonial languages, every single one is built and swimming in shaming linguistics, guilting linguistics, justice linguistics, right? So we can't really get away from it. So seeing the patterns is like when somebody comes and says, "You're so vain," or "Who do you think you are?" or "Your work is dangerous" was another one a lot of people would bring, who had never done my work and never been my clients. And being dangerous is like the most awful thing. I don't want to be that, right? And realizing that I carry that thing, "You're dangerous." I'm like, to what? But if somebody said that and I didn't investigate, I believed them automatically. Oh shit. Oh God, I got to find out where I'm dangerous and I got to take that out and I got to fix it. Right? Because I don't know that I get to go, wait a second. Shanti, are you dangerous? Like actually asking myself my own goddamn opinion. and ask myself, is that my experience? When somebody says, "You're arrogant," is that my experience? It's not mine, but go ahead, it can be yours. What am I going to do? Like, or I feel intimidated by you. I'm like, and you're telling me why? I'm not intimidating anybody. That's not something I'm doing. But you see how those are pushbacks of like trying to change me instead of dealing with whatever they're feeling. Like if they could say, "I'm intimidated by you," if they would say something like, "I find you really fascinating," it'd be much more honest. Or "I don't think that I agree with the way that you're saying that." I'd be like, "Cool, what do you think?" But we're not used to communicating like this. Right? And because the blame, shame, and guilt is so strong, it's centuries old. It's not ancient by any fucking stretch of the imagination. It's at 8,000 years old max. But to our psyches and to our development in that time, it's deep. Super, super deep. And so, yeah, when you learn to deconstruct blame, shame, and guilt, you start to see the patterns everywhere, and it will be like overwhelming for a little while. That's part of the phases where it's just like, whoa, go, and then you start to realize I'm shaming. Oh shit. And you start to catch that. You start to pull it back. And you start to deconstruct it. It's a whole layer of things, but it's an absolute pattern of behavior that you can see and you can notice. Absolutely.
Would you say it's different for everyone, or is there kind of like a similarity?
No, there's no,
how it expresses?
it's like I said, it's not creative. It's not life-giving. It's not moving things forward. It has one purpose and one purpose only: manipulation and control. That's it. It has no other purpose. So it is classic. There's like, if I ever wrote a textbook, I won't, but there is very classic and very textbook how it works. And then of course, there's people who are very kind of blunt in their patterning and their behavior. And there's people that are very, let's call it suave and articulate. And it sounds in our world, if you were to go out into the world, people would be like, oh yeah, there's nothing going on here. But when you see it, you can't unsee it. And you see it everywhere. And you can see how, it's like, it's both implicit and explicit. But the pattern, once you see it 3 or 4 times, is the same everywhere. Everywhere. And in everyone.
Yes.
Are there different characteristics just because a person is a person? Yes, but the pattern is the same. And this is how you know it's synthetic. Because your sadness and my sadness, while might have a similar frequency, yours is definitely yours and mine is mine, and they're discernible. And when you're sad and I'm with you, even in the ethers, I feel you, I relate to you, I automatically move in care towards you. Shame makes me go, ew. It disconnects us from each other. Or it makes me attack you. Those are 2 options. And that's what's synthetic. So no matter, and if you're angry and your anger has your frequency, and I own my anger because I know my anger is not dangerous, I can be right there with you with no problems. And I'd be like, come on, bring it. Okay, keep bringing it. Let me hear that. So long as you're respectful and we're in a relationship of trust, it's not a problem ever. But you take in shame, you take in guilt, you take in blame, you take in sabotage, you take in doubt, you take in unnecessary fear, and you're going to get these like responses of like disgust and move away, or attack and kill. There's only
I love that. Yeah. And I know part of the episode was about deeper self-trust. So I'm just wondering if we can explore how, well, all of that really, how shame blocks us from trusting ourselves, but also how we can cultivate that deeper self-trust.
So shame, blame, guilt, and all the subsidiaries, plus the indoctrination and conditioning we're all swimming in, says, don't you ever trust yourself. Trust God, trust religion, trust government, trust adults, trust authority, trust healers. Outsource it, but don't you ever trust yourself, because who the fuck do you think you are? And who the fuck do you think you are? Shame. Right? And because when you categorically trust yourself, and this is my clearest boundary with myself, I trust myself absolutely. And I am okay if I'm like, I trust myself. I like this metaphor for trust. I'm a woman, so this is very woman specific. I'm in a car park, a dark car park at night. I go to the elevator, and there's this big burly, like kind of motorcycle looking dude. And it feels real. I would rather be wrong about him and not get on the elevator than be right about him and get on it. So he might be fucking Santa Claus. He might have 27 grandkids at home. He might be the greatest man on the planet. I'd rather judge his character wrong and trust myself 100% than get on that elevator and be right about him. And that's how I live my life. And it's just a practice, right? And here's the other thing. You'll make a choice. and the choice doesn't pan out the way you thought it was going to, because you've been taught that if you make a choice, you are the controller of the universe. Right? And so if I make a choice to go straight, then I've got to go straight. But what happens is you make a choice, you go straight, and there's like a fucking curve in the road or a rock or a branch or something, and you got to go a different way, and you have to make another choice. I've never made a bad choice in my life. I've made choices that led to certain places, and then I made no new choices. But I didn't know that. For a long time in my life, I thought I make really bad choices and I fuck shit up. Like, that's what I believe. Instead of, no, I made choice after choice, because that's all we have in our, I'm gonna make a choice and it's gonna go in a direction that I can't actually control or know the outcome of. And so I might go this way and think it's gonna go great. I might hook up with somebody and it's a great thing, and then somewhere down the road they do something really weird. And I need to make a different choice about them. Was I wrong about them in the first place? No, I only had that much information in the first place. Now, through their behavior, I have new information and I need to make different choices about it. And I don't believe in red flags or inklings or I kind of knew. No, you don't know till you know. And then when you know, I hope you move. So you can't tell yourself lies. Well, I felt it. Well, I knew it. I said, no, you're only saying that now that you know. You can't turn around and smack yourself in the face back there.
Yeah, I love this because even just yesterday I had something that had made a choice, and then there was a deadline and we missed it. And I remember just instantly going into shame and being like, oh, you know, I've messed this up for life now. Like, this is
Yeah.
And
well,
then
I like you talked
voice, yeah, some little voice came in and was like, well, no, because then you'll just make a different choice, like at the next point. And it's like, it's so perfect.
You bring up a good point. They will always show up disproportionate to reality. Completely disproportionate. Like, you know, around things that, like, I'm not going to feel like, what? Well, like I showing up to a doctor's appointment and going, you're late. I'm like, yes, I am. Like, I'm not going to like fall into a puddle on the ground and cry in shame. But, you know, the implications that like I had done something so terribly wrong. I was not trying to disrespect anyone. It's like when we met and I said, you know, I live in real life where shit happens. Tech things weren't happening. I'm like, this is real life. It's normal. Like to get upset about that, which is in my original blueprint in my family dynamics, is to get upset about everything like it's the fucking apocalypse. And I'm like, for what? My life is finite. I have this one teeny tiny bit to be alive. And prior to all this work, I lived 1 foot in this life and 1 foot, I don't give a shit if I live. And moving into the trust practice of I trust myself absolutely allowed me to put both feet in this life fully and be like, motherfuckers, try to take me out. Like I'm standing here and I'm owning this life and I'm occupying this body and I trust myself. Whatever I choose, I can get out of it too. Like there's no choice that cages me because I don't participate in my own oppression.
That's so gorgeous. Yeah, I love that. I've just got this real sense as well, as you say that, of like all is welcome. Like that's just what I felt when you were sharing about that. It's really gorgeous.
And like I welcomed shame for a while too. And then it was like, no more. Right? That's the process. But you can't say no more until you can disengage it as a part of your identity.
It's so powerful. Yeah. Yeah, I love how you talk about it as a habit, the habit of shame. I don't know whether that is how you talk about it ongoing, but I know you said it to me when we were speaking.
It's a pattern of behavior rather than a thing that just is.
Yes. And I think that's really helpful to illuminate. I know we have been illuminating it as we've been going, but I think just the way that you just shared that is like really clear.
Because what I always say, like, because blame, shame, and guilt were created as behavior modification tools, mostly of other people, we believe that without them, we are psychopaths, sociopaths, and we will never change our behaviors. Because we've been taught that, not because we believe that, because we're not dumb. Okay, but we've been taught this. And so we think if I step out of, so Golem died, right? He's on his pier, he goes off, he dies. And then I felt like I was in the deepest, darkest cave I'd ever been in, like on some precipice. And if I screamed hello, it took hours for the echo to come back. It was just this huge chamber. And I was like, why do I feel like I'm betraying the entire human race right now? Because that's what it felt like. I'm going to walk into my life without this voice.
Wow.
I didn't know what that meant. I had no idea what the risks, benefits, consequences, I had no clue. But I'm like, all right, let's go. Let's do this. And I have since lived without them.
Wow.
And so I'm not saying it's possible for anybody else. It's just my experience. And I offer how I got there and the practices that I do and skill sets that I teach. That's all I do. I'm not trying to tell people, but if you walk away just thinking that you could undo some little bit of shame in you, then I've done my job. I'm not trying to save the world or tell everybody they can. That's not my place. And shame is just so mean, so nasty, so like I said, death oriented. It's not alive. It's not creative. It's not wanting the best for you by any stretch of the imagination. And it doesn't mean I don't still get nervous when I do things. I'm a person. I'm a human, but I don't do the shame, the blame, the guilt, the doubt. I'm not afraid of things that don't make sense to be afraid of, not because I'm better than anybody else, because I have time on task. I'm able to discern in a moment, is this a legitimate fear I need to have? Right? Because usually in a moment where you should be afraid, you're not, because you're just dealing with your life head on. Like natural fear is only happening about something that is occurring in this moment. There's a fucking bear. Right? And usually when there's a bear, your whole system changes anyways. You don't have time to be afraid. You'll be afraid afterwards. But if there's fear about, I'm afraid about what they're going to think about me, or I'm afraid the things that have no detriment to your existence, like your actual existence, those are, traditionally indoctrinated fears.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm wondering, is there anything that you can offer as a very practical thing for people to begin to kind of start to unpack this or deconstruct it in some way? I mean, the episode in and of itself is is going to be that, but is there anything particular that you would say is a good way for them to begin?
What's coming right now, it's very blunt. Give a shit about yourself. Like, really let yourself care about yourself like you really fucking matter. Because that is a requirement if you're going to start looking at shame. I matter. And I'm not worried if I matter to you. I'm unconcerned if I matter to others. I matter to me. And that is all that I need. We need each other. So I'm not saying, but in order for me to step into myself, is that I matter to me, and I wouldn't talk to anybody like that. So I cannot talk to myself like this. There cannot be a double standard. There cannot be I'm okay with talking to myself like this, but I would never talk to somebody else like that. That is the bullshit we've been taught. Like that I have to care for other people to prove my value. So I use the metaphor of I care for myself 51%. And for others at 49%. And it cannot change. The extra, the more is for me. Because then now with the choices I make in my interdependent interaction with people, which I need, everybody needs, is coming from a place of like, I got myself. So what I need from you, I can communicate clearly, directly, and in self-responsibility. And I'm not being harmful to the environment or the other people around me. I'm not codependent. I'm not any of those things. I own and take responsibility for myself. All my thoughts, my feelings, my words, my communication, my tone of voice, my body language.
That's gorgeous. Beautiful. Well, I think we're up on time. So that feels like a gorgeous place to start to complete, actually, given that piece about just care. That feels a really good place to end. I would love for you to share where people can find out more about you, anything that you've got coming up project-wise, so that people can find out more.
The best place to find me is on Facebook. It's where I do everything.
Yeah.
And then I also have a website that I think I've given you. It will be somewhere.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes.
And the only program online that I'm working right now will start in 3 weeks from now. And it's called The Simple Circle: A Year in Maturity. And it is the 26 skill sets to live a mature life.
So thank you so much, Shanti. It's been really gorgeous and really illuminating, and yeah, feels alchemy. So thank you. What a juicy episode. Here are my takeaways. Blame, shame, and guilt are the foundational root of other synthetic emotions that feel awful in our bodies. That's usually how we know we're experiencing them. Yet, blame, shame, and guilt are not natural emotions to us human beings. They're what we've been taught and conditioned into as little girls. We each have our own inner golem who helps us actively engage in these shame habits by beating ourselves up. Yet we would never dream of speaking to others in this way, and our innate self would not think like that either. We didn't do it to ourselves. Shame was usually done to us, but as soon as we become aware of that, we can no longer say that because we're beginning to do it to ourselves. And now we have a new choice. The deconstruction of these unnatural emotions requires us to become curious and open to more awareness. From there, we can choose to grow into adulthood and begin to take radical care of ourselves from the inside. Most often we have an adolescent mind frame because we've learned to innocently. As we grow in awareness, we can begin to say, no thank you. As aspiring healers, real healers, it is so important that we embody healing shame and embody what we are teaching for ourselves first, or be in the practice of. We need to feel absolutely 100% in our own bodies with lived experience of being grounded in that role. If you'd like to get the show notes and links for everything we've chatted about in this episode, head to www.secretwitch.co.uk. If you know a secret witch who would love this episode, please share with them to help them liberate themselves. And so you don't miss out on next week's episode, head to your podcast app of choice and hit subscribe. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.